BleemSync 1.1 has finally been released, and I'm going to walk you guys through how to get this set up on your PlayStation Classic. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Hey guys, I'm just putting this in here so that way you guys can be aware that this is going to be an install from a fresh USB drive. If you have a previous version of BleemSync that you are upgrading from, go down to the description and click on the link for the video that is an upgrade from BleemSync 1.0 or above up to 1.1. Again, this video is going to be a fresh install. It will not incorporate upgrading from your existing build. This will be a completely fresh, clean build with no games other than the pre-installed games. Other than that, we're good to go. Alright guys, so the long anticipated BleemSync 1.1 has arrived, and the exciting news is what that means is we now have OTG support, which is absolutely awesome. So no more throwing in a USB hub in your player 2 slot and having cables all over the place just to play multiplayer. We can now pop our USB drive into an OTG adapter through the back of the console, and both ports will be free and clear on the front of the console for us to plug our controllers in. There's a few other cool features that they've included. One of them is going to be a game transfer tool, which is going to be pre-built right into the software, and I will show you guys exactly how to use it. It's super easy. We're going to have to download an image database, transfer it onto our USB drive, and then we're pretty much good to go. We're going to be able to drag and drop all of our games right onto our USB drive and get everything loaded up nice and quick. I know there was a lot of complaints about the BleemSync UI portal that we had to log into when we plugged our console into our computer and loading one game at a time. This is going to make things substantially easier, a lot quicker, and you can drag and drop all your games in one shot. So I'm definitely glad that's the route they've decided to go. Now I do want to say that I have access to a private beta, and that's what I'm going to be basing my tutorial on, so I'm not going to be able to show you guys where to download the file from in the video, but I will leave a link directly to the page for you guys to download in the description down below. Just for timing's sake, I'm going to be able to have my video launched at the same time as release, so there's no way for me to be able to actually link to the page because the page isn't up and running yet. That being said, again, the links are going to be in the description, so hop on down there, go ahead and download your BleemSync 1.1 release. So moving on, I've actually already got my beta build right over here. You can see it's right here on the desktop. What we're going to do, as always, once it's downloaded, it'll be zipped. We have to unzip it. We're going to right click, we're going to extract it to its own folder. Doesn't take very long to do that. We've now got our new folder, and I'm just going to pop it up here. We're going to go ahead and open it up and take a look to see what's inside. So it's actually really basic. What we've got here is we've got a BleemSync folder and we've got a payloads folder. That's all that we've got. So what's going to be required is a dummy USB drive that we know is working with the PlayStation Classic and with BleemSync, as well as any other USB drive we want to use for our final build. This can now even be a USB 3.0 of literally any size. The reason we want a dummy USB drive is because we're going to install all the kernels with a drive we know is 100% compatible with BleemSync, and then after that's finished, we're going to then transfer all of our files over to our properly formatted final use USB. And I think that's probably going to be the easiest way for most people to do it. The important thing is that you are using a compatible USB drive. The easiest way to find one is a low volume, so if you're looking at 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, or 2.0. That's going to be your main one. Now, for me, I already have a 32 gig that I know is compatible. I've used it about, I don't know, a dozen times doing a bunch of different builds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link to it in the description down below. It's one of those really thin, low profile 32 gig SanDisk USB drives, and I'll throw a picture of it right here up on the screen so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. I know they work. I will leave links in the description down below if you want to pick one up for this specifically, but it's not necessary. If you guys have an older USB drive, definitely grab that and use that. There's no sense in spending money on one, especially since it's only going to be used for a 2-minute part of the installation. So anyways, now that we've got that, I've got my USB drive already popped into my computer. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And it's right over here. You can see it's SanDisk and drive H. We need to right click on that and we need to format it. So for the purposes right now, we need to make sure that it is formatted to FAT32 I believe it's also supported for ext4, but for what we're going to be doing, it's just going to be running on FAT32. We need to make sure that the volume label is labeled as Sony, all caps. Then we're going to go ahead and hit start. It's going to ask if we're sure if we want to do this. We're going to hit yes. Okay, perfect. So it's now formatted. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. We can close that. We're going to open up our drive again. And it's right over here. So one thing I want to mention with this installation, we're going to be going back and forth from the PlayStation Classic to the computer just a couple of times because there's going to be some file transfers that we're going to want to do. Essentially what this build is going to do is it's going to take a backup of the existing kernel information and the existing software on your PlayStation Classic. It's going to load that copy onto your USB drive, and then what we want to do is we want to take that, we're going to make a copy of it, and we're going to keep it somewhere safe. And the reason we want to keep it somewhere safe is that in the event that you ever run into a problem where your PlayStation Classic gets corrupt or something happens to it, those recovery files are going to be incredibly important for you to be able to fix your PlayStation Classic. The way that this is going to be built is that each individual PlayStation Classic gives its own unique codes in these recovery files, and without those unique codes, you're not going to be able to reformat or reflash your PlayStation console. So you can't just grab somebody else's files and try to flash yours. The files that are created are unique for your PlayStation Classic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on, and I'm going to make sure that I show you guys exactly how to handle things, but just be very aware that you're going to want to do things exactly like I do in the video, and you're going to want to make sure that you don't skip ahead or skip any steps. We want to do everything very methodically to make sure that nothing happens to our PlayStation Classic. Now, I know I might be scaring some of you guys. Don't worry, everything's going to be fairly straightforward, but just make sure that you guys are watching and doing everything step by step as it's done in the video. Awesome, so here we are. We've got these two files that we've just downloaded. We're just going to go ahead and copy those into our USB drive. Alright guys, so now that the files have transferred over, what we're going to need to do is we're going to remove our USB drive from our computer. We're going to unplug all power and everything to our PlayStation Classic. We're going to pop our USB drive into the second controller port, and then we're going to plug in the power to our PlayStation Classic, plug in the HDMI, and we're going to power on our console. And we're going to get some prompts on screen. It's going to then create that backup of the existing firmware on the PlayStation Classic, and it's going to load it and transfer it onto the USB drive, so that way we have our backup. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a double view almost. So I'm going to show you guys what the PlayStation Classic is going to be doing, as well as what's going to be happening on screen of your TV. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over right now so you guys can see exactly what that looks like. Okay, so we have our PlayStation Classic unplugged here, and this is my USB that we've been working with. We need to plug it into the controller port 2, just like with all of our other previous builds. Next, we need to reconnect the power cord. Now we just have to wait for the amber light to turn on. Once that happens, we can go ahead and press the power button and turn on our PlayStation Classic. I'm going to have the PlayStation Classic screen running in the bottom corner so you guys can see what's happening on screen as well. What we're going to see is that the PlayStation Classic will be backing up the existing kernel, recovery, and data partitions. This can take about 5 minutes or so just be patient. We're going to notice that the LED on the PlayStation Classic is going to be alternating between red and green, and that's totally fine. It's going to continue to do that while it's working. There's also going to be information displayed on the screen letting you know exactly what steps are happening. I'm going to fast forward through this process, but remember this will take about 3 to 5 minutes for you guys to have run on your PlayStation Classic. Once everything's finished backing up and the new payload's been installed, we're going to have a screen letting you know that the hack's completely done and the console is going to shut down in about 5 or so seconds. Once this happens and the console has fully shut down, just wait until you get that amber light on your PlayStation Classic again, and then you know it's safe to remove your USB drive. Then we're going to go and pop it into our computer. Alright, so now we're back on our computer, and what we've gone ahead and done is we've removed our USB drive again from our PlayStation Classic. So we went through that whole process. The PlayStation Classic did what we mentioned previously. It backed up the existing kernel and the partitions, and it installed a new kernel. It installed a bunch of new files onto your PlayStation Classic. What we need to do now is take our USB drive that we just used. We're going to plug it into our computer, which I'll do right now, and it'll pop up automatically. So you can see there's a new folder in here called logs. If you open it up, there's going to be just the bootloader information in there. But when we go into BleemSync, if we double click on this BleemSync folder, there's going to be something called backup. And if you open up backup, there should be 3 files in here. So these are the 3 files that were written, and these are your backup files from your PlayStation Classic firmware. So what we need to do is we're going to make a copy of this backup folder, and we're going to leave it somewhere on our computer, and we're not going to touch it unless there's an emergency. Now, I do want to make sure that you guys understand you want to keep these files on your USB drive. That is very important. If you don't have them on here and you plug this USB drive into the PlayStation Classic again, it will create a new backup, but it'll be a new backup of the new installed firmware that we just installed. So we don't want to do that, because then we're not going to be able to restore back to stock. This backup is important that it stays on the drive, as well as we make a copy of it and we place it somewhere else on our computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it directly to the desktop. And there it is. So now I have both on my USB drive. I still have my backup folder, which is right here. And I also have a backup folder over here on my desktop, which is going to contain the exact same files. So again, we're just going to leave this here, and we're not going to touch it again. This is our emergency backup files. We're going to leave it where it is. The next thing that we're going to need to do is install a custom kernel onto the PlayStation Classic. So this is going to be something that we have to download as well. So again, the link that I'm using, you guys won't have access to. I'm going to provide all the proper download links in the description below, but I just need to hop on here and download this custom kernel. And I'm just going to save it right to my desktop. It's done. We're going to go ahead and minimize that, where it says lboot.epb. This is the file that we're going to want to use. So we need to transfer it on our USB drive. So I'll go right back to the root so you guys can see. So this is our USB drive. We're going to double click on BleemSync, and we're going to double click on the update folder. We're going to double click in here, and we're going to drag this right into that folder. So now that it's in there, the next step that we've got to do is, again, we're going to remove our USB drive from our computer, and we're going to pop it into our PlayStation Classic. Now it's going to install the custom kernel. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to unplug my USB drive. I'm going to pop it into the second controller spot on my PlayStation Classic, and we're going to power on the console. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to that right now so I can show you again both what's on screen and what the PlayStation Classic is going to look like it's doing. Alright, so again, we're going to go ahead and plug our USB into the second controller port, and then we're going to go ahead and plug the power cord back in. Once the amber light comes on, we're safe to press the power button. Again, on the screen, we're going to be given some prompts as to what's happening. We're going to wait for the process to finish. The console is going to power off, and then when the amber light turns back on, we'll be able to remove our USB drive again. Alright guys, so we are back again on our computer, and I know, as I mentioned before, there's going to be a little bit of going back and forth for this install, but if you've got your PlayStation Classic right by your computer, it's really not that big of a deal. So what we need to do now is we need to take that USB drive that was just in our PlayStation Classic, and we need to plug it into our computer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Perfect. So you can see here we've got the lboot.ebp right on the root of the drive. We've also got our logs, BleemSync, and we've got a payloads folder here. So now we want our USB drive that we plan to use for our final build. It can be literally any size you want, and it can even be a USB 3.0. What I'm going to be using right now is a USB 3.0 generic 32 gigabyte brand that I just picked up from Staples. So we're going to go ahead and use that, but again, you can use any USB drive that you want. You can even reuse the USB drive that you've been using to install the kernel. If you want to do that, all you need to do is highlight everything inside your folder, right like this. You're going to copy it over to your desktop. You would right click on this file or on the on this drive. So we'll go to drive H. You would want to format the drive, and then we would just change the format to exFAT or NTFS, and then start the formatting. Once it's done being formatted, you would then transfer everything back into it. What I'm going to be doing for this is I'm just going to show you transferring to a different USB drive. So we've got our USB drive that was just taken out with our kernel information on it. What we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my other USB drive, which is right over here, USB drive I. And as you can see here, there's nothing in it, but it isn't labeled correctly. So I'm going to right click on it. We're going to go ahead and format that drive. We're going to change it from FAT32. I'm going to use exFAT for this format, and we have to label it as Sony. And we're going to go ahead and hit start. It'll ask if we want to do this. We're going to hit OK. Doesn't take long at all. Close that up. And then we're going to reopen that drive. And we're going to kick it over. And then literally all that we have to do is just grab all the contents from our dummy USB drive and copy it over to our finalized USB drive. That'll take about a minute or so, and I'm just going to quickly fast forward through that. Okay, so now all of our files have transferred over, and we no longer need our dummy USB drive. I can go ahead and close that, and now we've got our finalized USB drive right over here. We're not quite finished. What we need to do now is we need to take our USB drive and plug it again into our PlayStation Classic, except this time, this is the last time that we have to do that. We can go ahead and pop our USB drive into an OTG adapter right into the back of the console and boot it up. Now this is important. You cannot add games to this build yet until you've at least logged into the bootloader at least one time. So you need to remember, so you need to make sure that you do that before you even have any options at all in terms of downloading and transferring any games on there. We're going to go ahead and unplug our USB drive, and I'm going to show you guys a couple of options on some OTG adapters. So let's go check it out. As I just mentioned, we have a few different options for OTG adapters. I happen to have a couple of them here. The first is a really basic left elbow adapter. The second one that we have is a multi-end adapter. This is something that will probably come in handy later down the road once we have things like network support for RetroArch. You can have your USB connected into one of the ends and then a Wi-Fi dongle to another. That will allow you to plug multiple things into the console. For today, I'm just going to be connecting the left elbow style adapter. We just pop our USB drive into the side port. The OTG adapter then goes into the back of our console, and then we've just got to follow that up with a power cord. Now we just wait for our dear friend Amber, and we can turn our console back on. Alright guys, so here we are on the boot menu, and as you can see, it looks very familiar. The only difference is that we have an L1 button settings in the top right corner of the screen. So if we go ahead and press L1, it's going to give us a bunch of different options. You've got things like the boot disable _ health. What that means is the health and safety warning that pops up when you typically log into BleemSync. You can either disable it or enable it. I'm going to leave mine on for now. You've got things like menu music. You've got a boot _ quick. And what that would do is it would get rid of the Sony splash screen that happens when you first turn on your PlayStation Classic. And there's a whack load of things that they've got in terms of options there. Including generate internal game playlist, external game playlist. Those are things that are going to be handy in the future. What they are going to be doing is, in future build, they're going to be providing a little bit more detail about what each setting does. So when you actually look at the setting, it'll have a little blurb about what it actually does. So that'll be nice. But for right now, we're just going to leave everything exactly the way they are. We're going to go ahead and shoot down and cancel. And we're going to go ahead and load up. So as you can see, we have our 20 pre-built-in games. That's all that we've got, and the reason it's all that we've got is because we haven't loaded any games onto it. This is a fresh install. So right out of the gate, you are going to have access to the very first 20 games that were loaded onto the PlayStation Classic from the stock loader, and it appears that we even have access to our save points. So if we had previous save points when we were playing our PlayStation Classic before we did the hack, it looks like they've been pulled forward and we can now access them. So that's a really cool feature. Next, what I want to talk about is that there's 2 additional options on the screen here. So one, you can boot right into RetroArch right from the BleemSync menu, which is really awesome. We no longer have to go all the way back to the boot menu and then access RetroArch. We can actually do it right from here. Additionally, we also have a quick access button to get to the boot menu. So from within BleemSync, we now have access to the boot menu. We also have access to RetroArch, and we have access to BleemSync, obviously. So in terms of adding games, I am actually going to create a separate video that I will launch at the exact same time. And I figured I would do that just because it's a little bit more of a process the very first time you want to transfer some games onto it. Now, it is very easy. It is exactly like I'd mentioned before, drag and drop. It doesn't take any energy. It works really quickly. But there is one additional step that we're going to need to do, and that's load up all of the artwork databases into our build. Rather than make this video a 30-minute or 40-minute video, it would just be easier if I split it up into 2 videos and I launch them both at the same time. So that's what I'm going to do. I will have a link for that directly in the description down below. So if you guys get this set up and installed and you want to then start adding games, you have access to an additional video to show you guys step by step on how to do that. So it's nice and easy, nice and quick. But that's pretty much it, guys. We've got a really awesome build here, and we know that we're functioning on OTG. We are able to use essentially any USB drive, and I shouldn't say any, but I'm going to say 95% of the USB drives on the market will be functional, including external hard drives. So if you want to have the entire PlayStation library on your build, you can absolutely do it now, and you don't need additional wires, you don't need anything else. You just need an OTG adapter, and you can pop in an external hard drive, and you can get this up and running, and it'll run beautifully. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you so very much for watching. As I mentioned before, all additional links are going to be in the description down below. If you need anything in terms of help or support, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. I highly recommend that you join the Discord for the Mod My Classic group, because they have an amazing and very supportive development team that's going to be there. If you run into problems and it's not something I can help you with, they can definitely help you out with it. So again, join that Discord. Link's going to be in the description down below. But thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.